Filling up gets a little easier as petrol shortages ease in most parts of the UK, but some areas remain short on fuel. More long queues of frustrated drivers in London and the South East, with the military preparing to help with deliveries. The Prime Minister is appealing for drivers to be patient.
I appreciate how frustrating it has been, how infuriating it has been for people. The situation is stabilising, but it's a problem that has been driven really by demand, not by supply.
Hammering out a deal, the climate negotiators plotting the path to next month's crucial climate summit.
She gets her moment. Lizzie Deignan makes history here in Roubaix.
And a British winner of the prestigious first women's Paris-Roubaix cycling race in northern France. Good evening. Petrol retailers say supplies have increased, cutting queues for fuel in most parts of the UK. But there is a warning that in London and the South East there are still critical problems. On Monday, the military will help with deliveries, and 300 foreign tanker drivers have been cleared to start work in the UK, with Boris Johnson not ruling out offering more visas. With the latest, here's our business correspondent, Katie Austin.
There were more queues to fill up this morning. This was in southeast London.
This is the first time I'm queuing up because my boy normally gets it for me. But today, oh my gosh, it's like Christmas came early.
These drivers in Newcastle, though, weren't having issues.
No problems at all. I've just put £100 in the van to keep us going for the week.
Well, a few days ago it was very hard, but I think it's starting to pick up a little bit now, you know.
The body representing independent forecourts says availability across the country has improved. It thinks about 2/3 of sites now have petrol and diesel, while 16% have run dry. But it has labelled the situation in London and the South East as critical.
The prioritisation for deliveries must now go to London and the South East and to the independent forecourts, which make up 65% of all forecourts across the UK.
200 military personnel, including 100 drivers, have been called in to help boost supplies. They're being trained and will start on Monday. Amid a shortage of HGV drivers across the economy, 5,000 visas for foreign workers had already been announced, lasting until Christmas Eve. That includes 300 fuel tanker drivers. Now we know they will be able to start immediately, and the length of time they can stay for has been extended until the end of March. 4,700 of the visas are for food lorry drivers. They won't be able to start until later this month, but the length of their stay has also been extended until up to the end of February. Visiting Leeds General Infirmary today, the Prime Minister didn't rule out any further relaxation of the visa rules.
What we have now is a system that allows us to control immigration, and that gives us flexibility. We can open up our markets if we need to, and of course we'll keep everything under review.
Ministers insist the fuel situation will continue to improve if people only buy what they need. Even when supply levels return to normal, motorists are being told they should expect to pay more at the pump as wholesale prices rise. Katie Austin, BBC News.
Well, our political correspondent, Chris Mason, is in Manchester, where the Conservative Party conference begins tomorrow. Chris, how much of an issue will the fuel crisis be at conference, do you think?
Yeah, evening to you, Clive, from the Mancunian drizzle. The government's pretty bullish around all of this. The Prime Minister sees it through the prism of Brexit and what he sees as the motivation of plenty of people who voted for Brexit, wanting lower immigration and higher wages. And he sees this as part of an economic transition from an era of relatively low wages to one of higher wages, and therefore says that hauliers in the longer term will have to improve pay and will have to improve conditions. But what lever has he pulled to try and ease the situation at the moment? It is the immigration lever, with an easing of the restrictions on visas. So yeah, the conference getting underway here. Prime Minister arrived a couple of hours ago. One of the slogans you may just be able to see, getting on with the job. Not easy this for the Prime Minister with the fuel situation and real concern from lots of people, not least some people here at the conference, about the cost of living as we see inflation rising, energy bills rising. At just the point we're seeing that uplift in universal credit being cut and the furlough scheme ending as well. There'll be plenty of talk here in the next few days about levelling up. The concern for plenty of people, of course, is bills going up.
Sure. OK. Chris, thank you. Chris Mason there in Manchester. And the Andrew Marr Show will be live from Manchester tomorrow. Among the guests, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham. That's at 9 a.m. on BBC One. The government's latest coronavirus figures show there were 30,301 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means on average there were 34,855 new cases reported per day in the last week. There were 121 deaths. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. On average, in the past week, 114 were announced every day. The latest figures on those being treated in hospital and the percentage of people vaccinated hasn't yet been made available. Now, climate negotiators from around the world have been holding talks in Italy ahead of the crucial environmental summit known as COP26 in Glasgow next month. The meeting in Milan with delegates from around 50 countries is one of the final opportunities to shape the agenda for Glasgow. Our environment correspondent Victoria Gill has more details.
Frustration on the streets as young activists marched to the Milan Climate Conference on Friday.
This is our future and we have to fight for our future.
So no matter what.
Inside the conference today, a mood of quiet formality as negotiators brought this meeting to a close. What's being discussed, though, could hardly be more urgent.
Fires and floods and the melting of the ice and rising of the sea. Turmoil among populations.
The overall message from leaders here is one of cautious optimism, that it will be possible to reach a decisive climate agreement in Glasgow, but that it won't be easy.
Glasgow is the starting line.
People who are here in Milan representing some of the most vulnerable and small island nations are really concerned that we're still a long way from the trajectory of keeping global temperature increase this century to within this key threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius.
We're already at a 1.1 world. We're facing increasing frequency and severity of storms and flooding. A 1.5 world is very scary to think about, especially for islands like us. And what's even scarier is that we're still not there in terms of ambition, in terms of cutting down emissions.
This vast coal mine in Odisha in India, a country that still depends heavily on coal for energy, is just a glimpse of what a challenge it is to slash carbon emissions. But leaders here agree that meeting that challenge is now urgent.
By 2030, we need to reduce emissions globally by 45%. But what we need is everyone to come forward. And if there is a gap, we're going to have to set out how we will close this gap in this decisive decade.
The true test, bringing the politics in line with the science, will be at the critical UN Climate Conference in just 1 month's time. Victoria Gill, BBC News, Milan.
Tens of thousands of abortion rights advocates have been holding demonstrations across America. They're opposed to a new law in Texas that severely limits access to abortions in the state. There are also wider fears the Supreme Court may soon roll back national abortion rights. Our correspondent Barbara Plett-Usher's report from Washington contains some flashing images.
Activists are sounding the alarm. This is a moment when abortion rights face their most significant challenge in nearly half a century from conservative lawmakers and judges.
Well, I'm very worried. I think it's time for a course correction. We've been doing this for more than 50 years.
Now we're back here again, and it's just like, when is this going to end, you know? But they're going to keep putting out attacks, and we're going to keep fighting them.
Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to get an abortion today. It's the hardest decision that a woman will have to make in her entire life, and we should trust women to make that decision for themselves.
Women's rights!
In Texas especially, protesters have been fired up by a strict new abortion law. It bans the procedure after only 6 weeks of pregnancy.
Millions of children lose their right to life every year because of abortion. In Texas, we work to save those lives.
The Supreme Court allowed the extreme Texas law to go into effect, a sign to protesters that the balance of power on the bench has shifted. Conservative control strengthened by Donald Trump's judicial appointments. And they will take up a challenge to national abortion rights in just a few months.
Organizers are hoping this will help them recruit new activists for the fight ahead. And it's a deeply political one, perhaps more than any other issue in American law, divided along bitterly partisan battle lines.
A confrontation just outside the Supreme Court, but the future of abortion rights will be decided inside. Barbara Platasher, BBC News, Washington.
The supermarket chain Morrison's has been bought at auction by a US private equity firm. If approved by shareholders Clayton, Dubilier and Rice, which is advised by the former Tesco boss Sir Terry Leahy, will pay almost £7 billion. The Queen has been addressing MSPs at Holyrood to mark the opening of the 6th session of the Scottish Parliament. Accompanied by Prince Charles and Camilla, the Duchess of Rothesay, the Queen said at the beginning of a new session was a time for renewal and fresh thinking.
Members of the Scottish Parliament, as we all step out from adverse and uncertain times, occasions such as this today provide an opportunity for hope and optimism. Marking this new session does indeed bring a sense of beginning and renewal.
Now, with all the day's sport, here's Chetan Pathak at the BBC Sports Centre. Hi there, Chetan.
Hi, Clive. Thank you. Good evening. We start with a landmark victory for Britain's Lizzie Deignan, who took a sensational breakaway win in the first edition of the women's Paris-Roubaix cycling race. The former world champion battled through difficult conditions, holding off a powerful late surge by Marianne Vos, who finished over a minute behind. Nesta McGregor reports.
She cannot believe it. Incredible.
From the City of Love, tears of joy. Lizzie Deignan and the realisation she'd made history. It's taken 125 years for women to be able to compete in this event, but bad weather meant not everyone who started would finish.
It's going to be really tough for these riders.
From the halfway point of the race, the British rider was in front, even if at times her back wheel went side to side. Other riders in the chasing pack weren't so lucky. Count them. 1, 2, 3. The biggest threat to Deignan and a long-time nemesis was three-time world champion Marianne Vos, but the Dutch rider couldn't close the gap.
Lizzie Deignan makes history here in Roubaix.
As the 32-year-old crossed the line, a smile that said it all.
It's proving that there's appetite for women's cycling and that the athletes here can do one of the hardest races in the world, and I'm so proud that I can say I'm the first ever winner.
The woman from West Yorkshire, making the whole of Britain proud. Nesta McGregor, BBC News.
Now, after some tumultuous times, including relegation last year as a punishment for multiple salary cap breaches, Saracen supporters had some good news today, with a consortium of investors agreeing a £32 million takeover of the club. But there was disappointment on the pitch as they suffered their first defeat since being back in the Premiership. A penalty try deep in added time helped leaders Leicester snatch victory by 13 points to 12 and maintain their 100% start to the season. And next to football, Match of the Day is coming up next on BBC One, so if you don't want to know the scores, look away now. 3 points clear of Chelsea in second. And over on the BBC Sport website, you can follow the live tennis that is underway. Britain's Cam Norrie playing Andrei Rublev. Rublev 3-1 up in that opening set in the semi-finals of the San Diego Open. But that is all your sport for now. Back to you, Clive.
Chetan, thank you for that. And that's it. You can see more on all of today's stories on the BBC News channel, but from me and the rest of the team, have a very good night.